Hello, welcome to Christmas. I think I'll use this as the first page, although I'm not actually making it at the beginning, because this is a good quote that is starting to become me for this year. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the second Corona edition of the Hochschulrheinwahl Technology and Bionics Fachschaft, whatever we want to call it, Christmas thing, because it's not really a lecture anymore. There are infinite me's into the background trying to do something, probably all the same thing, and I will stop them doing that when I manage to get my green screen to stop fading my teeth and eyes out. So, in proper green screen style, hopefully working somewhat better, we will carry on. But the main thing this year is the global intelligence test of our pandemic, which is showing up people for how gullible they are. This is the real data from the UK. Obviously there's a big warning there saying not to use the raw data for judging the effectiveness of vaccines, but you can see there is a trend towards people being vaccinated with 2 doses not being affected as much as anybody else. In this case, it's only unvaccinated and vaccinated with 2 doses, but those are the data that they have. It doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of alternative information, particularly going as far as saying that Bill Gates is actually practicing medicine and personally injecting people, one assumes, with some kind of medication, which we'll see what the story is that he wants us to have a look at. Oh yes, a Canadian politician, so they're bound to know a lot about something. It's on a website called Rights and Freedoms, which should be a red flag to us that it is complete bullshit. Unfortunately, whoops, I'm just check where I am because I can't see myself and you at the same time. Okay, unfortunately, this is a truism that we have come to suffer through this at this moment, that it is possible to make up stuff and shit quicker than it is possible to debunk it, because you have to bring evidence and prove that it's not true, whereas somebody just making stuff up can make stuff up on the fly the whole time. And so it takes a lot more effort, even though there are a lot of people trying to remove the bullshit, there are a lot of people making up new bullshit the whole time. Such as this, for example, where you would take vitamin C for COVID. You would think that that would have gone away just for background information. This idea of taking large amounts of vitamin C to make you healthy goes back all the way to historical genius Carl Linnaeus, who thought that vitamin C was a sort of miracle cure. It was one of his few occasions where he didn't get it right. He was otherwise a great guy. And unfortunately, the speed of bullshit coming, let me move this across so you can see it better, is quicker and quicker these days because of social media. And also because we're all sitting at home fucking around on our computer instead of being in lecture theatres and talking to each other. So that's a good time to cut and talk about something else. Let's go into the lab and set fire to some stuff. Or maybe we'll do an experiment first with an oscillating reaction. I think we'll do that. So this is it, the Bellasoft Subutinski reaction. It's a reaction of different bromine oxidation states, so it's a bromate and bromide reaction, and they react together to form very strange oxidation states. The red and blue colours are different oxidation states of iron that we can see. It's a redox dye. What's interesting about this reaction is the intermediate states get locked in because they catalyse themselves, so it switches completely to blue and completely to red, and because they switch over when it's filled up and can't go any further, it switches to the other form, and that means it behaves very much like a fractal. As you can see, these sort of circles are growing out and interacting with each other, and eventually it gets very complicated and messy, as it's doing now. I can reset it at that point by giving it a shake. It all goes back to one of the colours, blue or red, and then it starts from random points again, where it just happens to be slightly further on in one way. You can see the whole thing is changing red, blue, that's the oscillating reaction, but the opposite is happening at small points, and that radiates out. It switches at a slightly different rate, and you get these concentric circles which then crash into each other and build up the same strange pattern, but every time it's completely random. It's kind of pretty and fascinating. This is, I think, 4 times normal speed. It's kind of slow. In a beaker, it just changes red, blue. In a thin layer like this, it does this more exciting colour change. Well, we could leave this for a really long time, but it doesn't really do anything new. So we will go on to something else. One of the problems with Corona is that there is a new thing that we can't do anymore, and that is this demonstration is not nearly as cool as it used to be. So what you do is you get a nail and you poke it up your nose like this, and it's kind of unpleasant at this point, and you get it and you push it in. Hang on, I've got to do it this way around. I'm very slow at this. So then it kind of hangs in there, and then if I get hold of it like this and pull it out, you can see quite how much of it goes in. And it's true, it's not actually a trick or anything, there really is a hole there where it goes in, and obviously people these days with Corona tests and everything are no longer quite so unaware that that is where you actually breathe through. Weirdly, most people think that you breathe up the top of your nose, where it doesn't really go. Anyway, that's an interesting thing. I learned to do that for this, and it turns out to be not a very useful skill after all, because now everybody knows how it works. Normally at this time I make fun of German people, because that's kind of what I'm like. This time I thought I would talk about the difficulty of having international jokes. So this is an example of a joke that it's a little bit close to the mark, but it's quite funny for people from the UK. But it doesn't make any sense to most of you. Jerry Adams is a politician who may also have been involved in some bombings, which is obviously not that funny, but somebody telling him he surely knows somebody who can fit a timer is kind of humorous in a risky kind of manner. This is another joke which is actually more interesting in an international context, because if you, like most of us, are exposed to US culture, something that's majestic ass is obviously a big thing. Americans use ass as a sort of exponential additive to words to make it seem bigger. It makes more sense in European languages that have additives to words to make them smaller or bigger. What's interesting I'll start again. What's interesting in this is that in UK English, which probably very few of you will appreciate, an ass biscuit has another meaning entirely. It means a fart. And so this joke is completely different, has a completely different meaning in English than it does in American. So having said that, let's go and blow something up. So this time what we're going to do is make some silver fulminate, which is the thing inside snap-its or the things you throw at the ground and they go pop. It's a very sensitive explosive, and it's made from silver nitrate and nitric acid and also ethanol, which I'm going to put into this test tube. It isn't really very smart to make a sensitive explosive inside a glass test tube, but it's going to get quite hot, so I didn't have a huge amount of choice. I'm doing it in a fume cupboard because that's also a bit safer. I'm not sure what I'm doing right now. Obviously I've got the sound down in the lab because it's very loud in there. There's a reflection of me, and I am going to look at it. It's going slightly brown. You may notice it's changing colour somewhat in the test tube. That's because it's about to do something interesting. The interesting thing is coming up. Here it goes. So now it's breaking down the nitric acid and making nitrous oxides. You can see the darker little bits of nitrous oxide going up. It's kind of a foam and kind of a gas, and so that's why it looks kind of chunky, which is cool and interesting. It's not usually a good thing when reactions do this and get away. Now it's boiled over a little bit, so that's obviously not so good. In this case, this reaction is supposed to do this, apparently, although other sources say it's better if it doesn't. But it's a lot easier if you just do it like this. The alternative is more complicated, and I'm lazy, so I'm going to do it this way. So we're just waiting again, and it will go off again a second time, I think, probably. Oh no, it's going to be boring. Right, let's so now we're going to speed through this bit a little bit. I'm hoping it's working. Yep. And then we will... Is it speeding through? Doesn't look like it's speeding through really. But eventually I will get round to adding a little bit more ethanol and it will take off again, I'm hoping. Here we go, open the fume cupboard, and here I go, adding some more, and off it goes. First of all, gone really boring, and now it's bubbling away again to itself. So this is what it does. It's kind of fun in a really toxic way. That nitrous oxide is really bad for the environment and really bad for you if you breathe it in, and it also rusts all of our equipment, so it's not a great thing to do. When we eventually finish this reaction, we will see that a white precipitate drops out. That means something forms, and like a kind of cheese-like material forms in the bottom of the test tube, which is what we wanted. So here we are, running it again because I forgot to press record. So now what I'm doing is I'm leaving it to settle for a little bit so it can cool, and I'm adding a little bit more alcohol to it, ethanol, and our silver salt is not very soluble in ethanol, and so we end up with silver fulminate solid. Dealing. That's a silver salt that will explode when we heat it up. It's a primary explosive, it's quite exciting. About 50 milligrams of it will explode on its own and make a hole in a piece of aluminium, so we need to be kind of careful, which is why I'm wearing a glove, because I don't like my fingers. Yeah, so what I'm trying to do is carefully move it around and knock it to precipitate it out, and I'm trying to run around without knocking the camera over or trip over all the wires that we've got in there to try to record it. That's always really simple. Now I'm standing around and adding some liquid, and I thought you could see this because I could. It is slightly white. You can see it's slightly white. This is real. I'm going to tip it through a paper towel to filter it. It's going at about twice normal speed because it was really boring. So here we go, tip it through this paper towel, and we will soon have this bit over the blow it up, because that's the time. We can either blow it up by whacking it with a stick, or we can blow it up by setting it on fire. Both of them work pretty well, and this is an unusual explosive in that it will detonate whether it's wet or dry. It's not as good when it's wet, but it's not exactly safe either. So here it is, dried out, and yeah, that was disappointing. Maybe if we set it on fire, it would be better. Okay, just got to find some fire. I'm just having a look for some fire. Here it is. Set it on fire. Yeah, okay, that was also fairly unexciting. Maybe a bit more fire is required. Yeah, okay, let's give up on that one. So I didn't make the silver fulminate. Let's try a different thing. A different thing is an iodine salt. The iodine salt is a lot easier. The iodine salt is a lot easier to make. Here it is on this piece of paper. It doesn't detonate very well when it's wet, although it is in some ways more sensitive than the silver salt. So this is nitrogen triiodide. It's drying out unbelievably quickly because it's a kind of time lapse here. It takes about 30 to 60 minutes to dry out properly. Obviously you can see the sun's coming up and things are happening. It's getting drier and drier, and now I'm going to poke it with this stick. Yeah, okay. We'll come back to this. Now this year I got suspended from Twitter, as you can see by this message here. You get to the window so that I can, wrong window. You get to the window so I can see what you can see. As you can see, I got suspended for violating the Twitter rules, more specifically hateful conduct. And I obviously didn't think that I'd been particularly hateful, and so I appealed the suspension. And the system to do this is you can't contact anybody, they don't have an email address, they don't have anything else, there's an online form. You send a message to the online form and you get a reply. And the reply looks like this, where it says, we're not going to restore it. And if you reply again, you get another message that's much the same, and if you reply again you get another message, and if you reply again you get another message, and it can become a kind of hobby where you keep sending them messages and they keep sending the same reply over and over and over and over and over again. Oops, got a little bit too far now. Until you have to do something else. So we're back in lab, it's another 10 minutes later and we're going to give it another poke. Yeah, okay, so much for that again. This is what the form looks like. You have open fields for things like description of the problem, so you can write in what you did. You have to tell them what software it was, just in case it's a software issue. And you give them some of your information, more of your information as if they didn't have it already. And obviously in those boxes I was putting things like I didn't do the thing you said I did, and defending myself. And eventually I got tired of doing that, and so I wanted to check to see if it really was a bot. So I sort of wrote some more humorous messages in there, like this one. And then eventually I graduated to slightly more aggressive. Okay, try 3. Let's have another go. It's not very promising. This is going to be another disappointment, isn't it? We'll come back again. And eventually I decided to play this version of the accept my money and therefore you accept my contract type of scam. Although I am aware that it's not legally binding really, but we're trying to see whether we can get them to react. And eventually they did. And this is what I got back. So it appears that being a dick is what helps you to get a Twitter account back, which seems to be not an advisable thing to train people to do. Right, I've lost all hope now, but let's have a touch on this. Oh, it's making crickling noises. Yep, that was it. Slow motion. There we go, slow motion. There it goes. That's iodine vapor blowing into the air. Let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at our bit of paper. Instead of stuttering, let's have a look at the bit of paper very slowly because we're in slow motion at the moment. What's going on? I think I'm probably... here we go. Yeah, I forgot to bring the camera with me. Here we go. And we can see that it's amazingly managed to blow a hole in a wet piece of paper. That may not be very exciting, but it was a very tiny amount. To start with, this happened, which is new and quite interesting, Christmassy at least. And then people started to block me, to avoid, which is kind of annoying when you're trying to get funny things to put onto video. So this is a guy who is a general science denier, who is also he's a kind of engineer, but he seems to have done all kinds of things a little bit. When I made fun of him, he instantly blocked me, so I can't show you anything that he wrote to me. But I did have some success getting rid of some people, like this guy. He's an anti-vaxxer, but he started off before Corona. He's a pre-Corona anti-vaxxer from Australia. So I decided, well actually I got lucky and I got invited to do unto others what they had done to me. So what it turns out is, if you're on Twitter and you get enough people to complain about the same person all at the same time, then they get into trouble. Obviously it's not just that, but it does improve the chances of something bad happening to them. So this is a person who says there are lots of testimonials. Testimonials, as you know, because you're reasonably scientific, testimonials are not evidence. They're just people saying, yeah, things happened to me. There are a whole lot of cases where people claim that things happen to them, and they are of limited use. Anyway, this is a sort of a collection of information for vaccine deniers, and most of it being completely untrue. I didn't have a long time to look at it, because after I got some people, there are multiple little groups of people who do this, just sort of report people en masse, and this is what happened. Their account got suspended. So that seems to work. So at least we've got somewhere, although Twitter have got difficult to get past and I got kicked off, it also means that other people are getting kicked off as well for doing bad things, and that's probably a good thing. So now what I'm going to do is light some propane in this little bag here. It burns with a nice orangey flame and threatens to set fire to the lab, so I better do something about that pretty quickly. Yeah, okay, not exactly ideal, but never mind, let's go on to the next thing. Moving on, we can see this fellow here has had a similar experience to me. So one of his papers has been turned down. He's annoyed. This is exactly how we all react as scientists. We get annoyed initially because it's a disappointment when your things get turned down. But let's have a look to see what it is that he tried to get published. I've chosen a particularly bad example because it's funnier. So this is one of the more offensive ones that he came up with. So it's a paper about rape culture, and let's dive into it. To start with, we can just categorize papers into different sections. So we can say some scientific papers are mostly driven by measurements by the person themselves or by the group. Some are driven by other people's measurements, so they're analyzing other people's measurements, and some of them, like Einstein's, are driven by theory and have very few to no actual measurements connected. His has pretty much no other measurements connected. So this is the abstract. We prove how men have higher entropy, I'm looking down at the screen, than women, and demonstrate why the domain of definition of entropy function in women's bodies are narrower than men's. So we would expect there to be some kind of measurement to prove that. Elucidate, blah de blah. First of all, we is what one uses in science historically, used to denote that it was done as a group, and they don't want to define who did the actual work. In this case, there's only one author, and so it's not reasonable to use we. But I often use we in a lecture or a question when I'm denoting that students are going to do things. I don't mean me. In this case, we is not reasonable at all because there's only one author. The only thing that one can write here is I. But anyway, that's just semantics. Let us have a look at this lovely quote. You can see that it's going to be really odd. But despite that, we can have a look at his actual theory part. So he's taken the Boltzmann equation. This is the real Boltzmann equation. S is K log W. Comes off his actual grave. That is a photograph stolen from Wikipedia of his actual gravestone. And it's about statistical mechanics. So the Boltzmann equation relates S, a real number from thermodynamics, that was theorized but not. So it's an crap, I've forgotten the word now. Let me stop. This time I've got some hydrogen in this little bag, and I'm a bit nervous it might explode, but when we light it we find that hopefully it won't explode. Nope, it's on fire. What we see is that the flame is a lot less visible than the other one, and that I'm better prepared this time. So trying again, S is entropy from an empirical formula, which means that it was made up to describe measurements, but it didn't originally have a basis in theory. Now Boltzmann is connecting it to theory by connecting it to statistics and saying the entropy that we measure in thermodynamics, which we're using as a measure of something, which we're not entirely sure what it is now defined as my constant times the log of the number of states of a system, and that works if we have a system where we can count statistically the number of possible states. This is true genius because it connects. It's a really, really fundamental piece of work, because it shows how the number that we've been using in our equation the whole time is related to real fundamental properties. In this paper we use Boltzmann as S is K log D, and D is disorder, which means that we've lost the whole advantage of the Boltzmann equation, which is where we're relating it to something that is not hand-waving. Disorder is a hand-waving, unclear definition. W, the number of states, is not. What he wants to do is calculate the entropy of a person when they're awake, sexually aroused, or tired, and he's given the values of the minimum and maximum and says that you die if you go outside, or actually it says if your entropy approaches the minimum. This also is a little bit weird because obviously if you have a minimum of entropy, that means that you are the most ordered. Higher entropy means more disorder or more microstates, to be more precise, and so therefore why would you be tired if you are more ordered? But anyway, it's backwards probably. Let's have a look at what he unusually is now citing. There's a paper cited, you can see that at the bottom. If we have a look at that, we can see it's a real paper. It's a real paper of real medicine and has none of these things in it. It's all about measuring proper chemicals in the blood of people. I think they're in a particular psychological state. So there is a problem here. There is nothing new, there's no new theory, and there are no new measurements, and so it doesn't really count as a paper. There's a reason for papers to not always be accepted. It's not just because the system is against you. Sometimes the system is against you, but it's not just that. If you just make things up and theorize and have no data at all, then you're no different from this. And once again we've got some hydrogen, but this time I'm going to blow some air with my lungs into the end. It's used up air obviously because I breathed it, but it's got plenty of oxygen in there for hydrogen. Hydrogen is quite aggressive. It's taking me a little while to get everything ready. Now I've mixed the hydrogen and some air together, and I'm going to do the same experiment back. Going back to Corona conspiracies, here is a thread that I've obviously got involved with there, and it's about it's on the Twitter feed of a guy called Malone, Dr. Malone, who claims that he invented mRNA vaccines and is now a vaccine skeptic. This is interesting because he was actually in among the people who started the idea of using mRNA as a prompt for cells to do things, but that doesn't mean that he invented anything. He's joined the fairly popular style of thing, which is where you are involved in inventing something, so you're one of thousands of people, and then you claim that you invented it. There's another guy who claims to have invented email, and he's exactly the same. Anyway, that's not important. Here is them saying that they are, that I am claiming to know more than the actual experts, which is, I guess, a good thing that they're actually looking for experts, whereas they may have made a bad choice in which experts to choose, but it's a little bit worrying. This is another one, because I did get back on Twitter so I could play with some people. They often lose the ability to speak English when you attack them. But I'm not the only one. Here is a person who, on their feed, got complained about that they're trolling people on a vaccine injury site, and it's actually on their own feed. And this is a symptom of the problem. I'll let you read through that one because it's pretty good. So this is really the state of education at the moment. This is why you come to college, to learn stuff, because obviously people need it. And this is why we have science communication, because obviously people need it. Right, here we are setting up an electrolysis. We're going to break this water, filthy looking water, make some hydrogen and oxygen, and it will have the perfect combination of hydrogen and oxygen to make water, and then we'll be able to make it go bang. So I hope you're ready for this one, because it'll be more interesting. And here we go. Okay, maybe my lighter's not working. I'll give it a bit of a shake. Yeah, okay. Good. Here it goes. No, it's just putting the bubbles out. Maybe it'll be better next time. Where is it? So here we go. Have another go. And before anybody complains that we don't do anything Christmassy, I usually talk about Norse beliefs at this point, but let's have a Christian version for this time. So this is a topical stolen cartoon, no picture, but anyway, the topical stolen thing for the season. Welcome to Christmas. Right, this should be working now. We can zoom in a little bit closer and get these bubbles to come out of here. That'll give us a bit of a better bang. So what we were hoping was that it would explode fairly excitingly. It's only a little bit, so it won't be super loud, but then obviously you're on the end of a microphone and loudspeakers, so I can make it loud if I want to. It's probably going to overload my microphone because this is actually quite loud. So obviously it's taking a while because I'm trying to make quite a bit. This is a mixture of soap and glycerol so that the bubbles last a long time, to give me a bit more time to do that, and I have to be very careful to put this tube in another container of water just in case a flame goes down it so it doesn't blow up my whole setup, which would suck. I like my fingers a lot. So now we're going to probably get on and do that. See if there's any more holes. Oh yeah, there's another hole there. Let's get another bubble in there where the one popped. So now we pop it in this water and off we go. Got to find the fire first. Yeah, okay, here we go. Nearly ready. Oh, there it is. Let's have a look at that in slow motion. The instant replay in slow motion now. Back to here. No, fuck. Oh, fuck. And here we are back on Twitter. Here is somebody saying, ironically, that everybody doesn't understand reality except them. And this is the bottom, somebody being upset about Dr. Dvorsky's dislike for Chinese traditional medicine and other types of non-functional medicine. But here we have a large number of people agreeing against me. I was at the top of this one, that it's ironic because they understand science and nobody else does. They are following a guy who claims to have invented RNA medicines. When you look at it, he did co-author a paper about RNA treatment for bacteria right at the beginning of when it became interesting, but he didn't really invent it. That's massive exaggeration. What do we see with actual figures? Well, if we go here, we can see an alternative type of graph. The bottom axis is rather ugly because it's the weeks in the year this year, but we can see that among vaccinated people, there's a slight upswing in hospitalizations, and among unvaccinated people, it goes mental. So be careful out there. And finally, a Christmassy message. So even if you're feeling down and a bit alone, somebody thinks that you're important. Hope you have a good Christmas, and hope you all survive and come back much happier and your family are doing all right. See you next year, hopefully.